What the heck is sin? I mean, we throw this word around a lot in Christianity. It's like drinking is sin, smoking is sin, looking is sin, breathing is sin, everything is sin. But have you ever stopped to wonder, like, what it actually is? Like, what is sin? Now, I know everybody's getting ready to pull out their Greek and Hebrew definitions. Hebrew, it's missed the mark. Greek, it tends to be more into like iniquity and guilt, which are all fine, but the problem is that when you look at how sin is used in Scripture, there are multiple places that seem to suggest that it's more than simply a thing you do, and rather it's something beyond that, something that works in you. And so sin just kind of becomes this really nebulous concept that we kind of throw around, I think, without really having like a clear or full definition or a real understanding of what it actually is, what it means, and maybe more importantly, how it works. And so naturally, to get a better understanding of this, I opened up my Bible and started reading. And boy, let me tell you, I was surprised when I got to the bottom of this one. So let's start with, I think, the most interesting thing, which is the very first mention of sin in the entire Bible. When I tell you that I was shocked when I found out that this was actually the first mention of sin, that doesn't even do it justice. So the first mention of sin is in Genesis 4:7, and it's where Cain's sacrifice was not accepted by God, and he's upset about it. Now, this is tremendously interesting. I think it's super important that we pay attention to the context for which the very first time sin is actually mentioned is placed within. Check this out. So it says, if you are doing what is good, shouldn't you hold your head high? And if you don't do what is good, sin is crouching at your door. It wants you, but you can rule over it. I want you to process that for a minute. The very first mention of sin, the first one in the entire Bible, first time it's ever mentioned, is mentioned in the context of your ability to rule over it. But this still doesn't quite tell us what sin is. So let's go to 1 John 3:3-6. It says, and everyone who has this hope in him continues purifying himself, since God is pure. Everyone who keeps sinning is violating Torah. Indeed, sin is violation of Torah. Okay, so we've at least got one definition of sin now, that it is the violation of God's laws. So sin is any act that violates God's laws. And of course, we also have to continue to contextualize it as it's also something that crouches at your door. It's something that has a desire to have you. So there's this kind of underlying force that has a desire to assert control over you. And then there is the acting on that desire, which causes you to violate God's laws, which then is, I guess you could say, sin in manifested form. So it's almost like you have sin in an unmanifested form, which is crouching at your door. Its desire is to control or to have you, right? And then you have its manifested form, which is when sin has taken control of you and then expressed itself in an action, which is violation of God's laws. Okay, but let's keep going. In 1 John 5:17, it says, all wrongdoing is sin, but there is a sin that does not lead to death. Okay, so we'll skip that second part. The most important part is the all wrongdoing is sin. So any wrongdoing, right? So that means that even things that are not included directly in the Ten Commandments, which would be what would be considered the Torah, anything that's not included in that 10, and of course, let me pause there. I recognize there's going to be a bunch of people that say, no, it's the whole Torah, it's the entire like 600 and whatever laws. I'm not here to debate that. Let's just say anything that is not written down but is still a violation of God's divine order and way that he set things up in the universe, which would be considered wrongdoing, that also is sin. So even the stuff that wasn't written down, whether it's in the 10 or the 600 and whatever, regardless of what it is, even if it's not written down, if it is something that is considered wrongdoing, that too is sin. But James expounds further. In James 4:17, it says, so then anyone who knows the right thing to do and fails to do it is also committing sin. He doesn't say also, but is committing a sin. So that means that technically sins of omission can also be sins. So that means you know what you're supposed to do. So God said, go do this thing, and you choose not to do that thing. And so your disobedience isn't one of action, but rather inaction. And so even that too is sin. Oh, but wait, there's one more. Romans 14:23, it says, but the doubter comes under condemnation if he eats, because his action is not based in trust. And anything not based on trust is a sin. Okay, so even doing something that isn't sinful, so eating food sacrificed to idols, in and of itself, the action itself is not sinful. However, if you in your conscience doubt that God's grace allows you to do that, then going ahead and doing it, so doing it not in trust, that also is sin. Is it any wonder we're confused about what sin is? I mean, at this point, it's like everything is sin, existing is sin. So anytime you encounter something like this, where something is everything, right? Something can't be everything, because if it's everything, then it's nothing. It's like if a word means everything, then the word means nothing. And so it's the same thing here. Sin can't just mean everything, because if it means everything, then it means nothing. And so there has to be a larger context that sin lives inside of, and it's having that context that allows us to understand what it is. Now, interestingly, I think the answer is actually found beginning in Genesis 4:7, but better expanded upon in 1 Corinthians 15:56. So let's start with 1 Corinthians and then we'll work our way back. So 1 Corinthians 15:56 says, "The sting of death is sin, and sin draws its power from the Torah." Now that's an interesting way to frame it. The sting of death is sin. You could almost imagine death as being a scorpion, and it has a stinger, right? And that stinger is sin. And so the scorpion is the place from which the sting originates. And the sting, why does it hurt? Because it's poisonous to us. So when a scorpion, death, stings you, it is stinging you with sin, or poisoning you with sin. But what's interesting about this is that it says here that sin draws its power from the Torah. And so that means that without the Torah, whenever death, the scorpion, stings you with sin, that sin can't poison you apart from the Torah. So somehow the Torah is empowering that sting, which is sin, to actually become poisonous to you. So apart from the Torah, it can't poison you. But regardless, the important thing we have to take away from this is that sin finds its context in death and the law. That's what the Torah is, right? So when we're trying to understand what exactly sin is, we have to understand it within the context of death and within the context of the law.